Hey everyone, this is Mike. Today we're going to be talking about White Mage in Shadowbringers. Now, White Mage has always been a job that I never really played all that much when it came down to me starting off healer in Final Fantasy XIV. Scholar was my favorite in Heavensward, Scholar was my favorite in Stormblood, and then a close second would be Astrologian, because I really enjoyed what they brought to the table. Scholar had the whole pet management together with the Aetherflow stacks, and then of course Astrologian has their card system. And then when you looked at White Mage, it didn't really have anything that was a resource that you had to manage. They just had some off-global cooldowns, and that was pretty much it. Of course, in Stormblood, the Lily system got introduced, which I thought was kind of cool at the start, but then when it came down to actually playing around with it, it wasn't really all that useful, or at least it didn't really feel like that, so I didn't really enjoy playing White Mage all that much in the previous expansions. Now fast forward towards Shadowbringers, and that is where White Mage has kind of become my most played healer right now, and the main reason for that is that I usually play healer in dungeons. Whenever I do Extreme Trials and Savages, that's when you'll usually see me on a tank or a DPS, but going into a dungeon, that is where my main role, so to speak, would be healer. And the main reason why I like playing White Mage in dungeons is because White Mage in dungeons is just blatantly overpowered for a couple of different reasons. One of them being their DPS output, because of the fact that Holy has a stun property attached to it, meaning that you're basically mitigating damage for your tank by just doing DPS, and then of course you doing DPS makes it so that the pull goes by quicker, as you don't again have to heal your tank as much, because the mobs are gonna be dead by the time that your tank starts to receive a lot of hard damage. And then the second thing as well is the fact that you have this really nice panic button, which is your benediction, and even if it isn't used as a panic button, it still synergizes really well together with pretty much all of the different tanks. You have a warrior in your party, they can use their invuln. You have a Dark Knight in their party, again you can use your invuln as well if you want, because if I want to just get them back up there, make sure they don't die from using their invuln, I only need to press one button and they're back at full HP, whereas with another healer I wouldn't really be able to do that, because I'd have to prepare like 2 Lustrates or maybe like a crit Excog on Scholar, or I would have to make sure that I have enough of Global Cooldowns on Astrologian to quickly heal them up again, to make sure that they don't die to the Living Dead debuff, whereas on White Mage, I just press one of Global Cooldown and it's all fine. So that is why White Mage is definitely my go-to when it comes down to healing dungeons. Now, if I were to ever give a recommendation towards a player that wants to get into healing and they're not quite sure which healer they want to choose, then I would also say that White Mage is probably the best way to go, because it is a fairly simple healer. You don't have any of the complex mechanics, I guess you could call them, like for example having a lot of your heals being stuck behind the fairy, having a lot of your heals being stuck behind the Aetherflow system. It's pretty much all just mainly focused around GCD heals, and then of course we still have a wide variety of global cooldown heals, especially right now. Back in the day White Mage was more GCD focused than it was now, but still the main source of White Mage's heals will be coming from their GCD, so it's really much of a, if you want heals, you've got some heals for that. You also have very strong and potent heals when it comes down to your global cooldowns, which the other healers don't necessarily have as much, and then of course you still have a pretty decent DPS output as well. And then when it comes down to dungeons, Holy is so incredibly strong. So let's take a look at what White Mage has to offer to see whether or not it is something for use. First of all, let's talk about their DPS. As with all of the other healers, we have Glare, this is a single target damaging ability. We have Dia, this is your damage over time ability. And then we have Holy, which is the AoE button. Now, of course, as I said, Holy stuns mobs. There is a stun resistance that kicks in after a few seconds, but in general you'll be able to stun lock mobs for about 5 to 7 seconds, and this is incredibly strong when it comes down to doing dungeons, because during this period where the mobs are going to be stunned for about 7 seconds, your tank is not going to be taking damage, and that is going to help you out quite a bit as you are leveling up White Mage through dungeons, or if you're going through the MSQ dungeons, that kind of stuff. So that is why White Mage is incredibly strong. If we take a look at some of the healing GCDs, and then we'll take a look at the rest as well, we have Cure. This is just a single target weak heal. At some point you'll get access to Cure 2, which is a stronger single target heal, and at that point you'll pretty much always want to be using Cure 2. If you want to have like a reasoning between why you would want to use Cure 1 instead of Cure 2, Basically, Cure 1 is more mana efficient if you're going to be spamming it, but Cure 2 is more potency efficient. So basically, because White Mage is also incredibly mana efficient because of some other tools that I'll talk about in just a second, you pretty much always want to be using Cure 2, as it is just the stronger heal, and then you can spend that second GCD on doing some extra damage, for example. And last but not least, we still have Regen. This is a instant cast ability, so if you need to move, if you need to, like for example, weave an off-global cooldown here or there, you can always put a Regen on your tank or another party member that might need it, and then they'll slowly take back up to full HP. When it comes down to our AoE abilities, we have Medica. This is just a spammable AoE heal that will do moderate amounts of healing. We have Medica 2, which is basically the same, but it also has a regen effect attached to it. So basically, you always want to be using Medica 2 if possible, because it is just the stronger heal. Of course, costs also a little bit more mana. But for example, if they already have the Medica 2 regen effect applied to them, and you still need some extra healing because you're not sure the party will survive the next AoE raid wide, then you can just follow it up with another Medica to make sure that they're high enough HP. And the last but not least, something that is really unique to White Mage is Cure 3. This is a AoE ability that does a crazy amount of healing, but it's also a very short AoE radius around you. So using this in your normal duty finder dungeons or even in your extreme trial party finders, Cure 3 is often not really used all that much because people are usually kind of scattered around the whole arena, and that way, because Cure 3 has such a short radius, you're not really going to be able to utilize it all that well. Where this ability shines is in static content, because of course when you're going into a static you can say to your team to come to you, make sure they stack on you so that you can just use Cure 3 and then hit everyone. Of course this ability has a very high mana cost attached to it, but it is also an incredibly strong heal that you get as well, and you can spam it, which is so important. So basically, if there's ever a part in the fight where you're not quite sure if you're going to be able to make it through it, say for example your co-healer died or something like that, then you can just say, okay, everybody stack on me, I'm just going to spam some Cure 3s to make sure that everybody survives. Then let's move into the Lily system. This got completely reworked going into Shadowbringers, and is one of the main reasons why I like White Mage so much right now, because back in Stormblood the Lilies were pretty useless, or at least they felt pretty useless, but right now in Shadowbringers it's actually a really nice addition to the White Mage toolkit, because it still keeps this focus of a GCD focused healer, but it also makes it so that you have some more mana management, because all of these Lily actions are completely mana free. They also grant you more movement and places to weave off global cooldowns, because again, all of the Lily actions are instant cast abilities. And then last but not least, it is going to give you some free heals, but also some damage to make up for the fact that you just used 3 GCDs to heal instead, because of course Scholar and Astrologian, they both have a lot of off-global cooldowns when it comes down to healing, whereas with White Mage, yeah, you do have a decent amount of off-global cooldowns now, but your main healing output is still going to be coming from your GCDs, and basically making it so that the Lily system are still GCDs is basically keeping it in this thematic of White Mage being a GCD healer, but you're also going to be refunded your DPS once you get to that Afflatus Misery. So basically every 30 seconds you get a Lily on your Lily gauge, which you can then spend on either an Afflatus Solus, which is a single target heal, or an Afflatus Rapture, which is the AoE heal. And then once you've used 3 of those, your little Lily on your Lily gauge will also start to bloom into like a red blossom, which we call the Blood Lily. And then you can basically use Afflatus Misery, which is your DPS skill. If you want to know how the damage works out, basically a Misery does the same damage as 3 Glare casts, which is your spammable GCD. So if we take a look at it, normally you can use 4 Glares in 4 GCDs, of course, but then if you look at the Lilies, you can basically get the damage of 3 Glares in 4 GCDs. But you also have to imagine, you just used 3 healing abilities, you got movement, you got places to weave off global cooldowns, and then of course you got that Misery in the end, which if you want and if possible, you can also unload under raid buffs and that kind of stuff. So the damage drop that you get from using these Lily actions is definitely not that bad, and it's actually something that I really like about White Mage, because you don't get punished for using GCD heals compared to like what you get on the other 2 healers, which I think is incredibly cool. Also, Afflatus Misery is not just a damaging ability, it's also an AoE damaging ability. So if you're using this in dungeons on a trash pack, you're gonna be able to burst them down quite quickly. And then moving on to the off-global cooldowns that White Mage has access to. Most of our off-global cooldowns are going to be for healing purposes, of course, but we also have some that do a little bit of damage for us as well. So first of all, we have Presence of Mind. This is quite simply a 20% attack speed buff, so this is going to increase our cast times, our GCD recast time, and even our auto-attack delay. But of course, White Mage is a caster, so our auto-attacks don't do that much damage. So this can be used to both increase your damage output, because, for example, go into a dungeon, press Presence of Mind, and then you're just going to be spamming holies really quickly to burst down that specific part of the dungeon. But you could also use this on your healing actions to make your healing come out a lot faster. It's basically just a really good universal attack speed buff. Then secondly, we have Benediction. Talked about this one before. This can be used as your panic button. For example, oh no, someone's almost about to die. Bam, you're full HP again. But this is also incredible if you want to work together with something like a Dark Knight, a Warrior, or even a Gunbreaker, for example, when they use their invulns, so that you can just get them back to max HP immediately. This completely trivializes the Walking Dead debuff from Living Dead as well from Dark Knight. So Benediction is just an incredibly strong ability. Then we also have Asylum. This is a little puddle that you place on the floor, a little bubble, I guess you could say. And as long as people are standing in it, they are just going to be getting a regen over time, of course. If they stand outside of it, they are not going to be getting this. Going into Shadowbringers, they also attached a healing buff to this, so as long as people are standing in the Asylum, they will also be granted increased healing received, which again is really great, of course. So Asylum is just pretty much a really good skill to use now. Then we have Assize. This is just the trifecta of what you want on a healer. It does damage, it heals, and it grants you MP. It's also an AoE ability, so it's basically just great to use on cooldown as much as possible. If you want to, of course, optimize your DPS on White Mage, you want to press Assize as much as possible in a fight. If you're like me and you want to keep it for healing, and or maybe like a mixture of healing and DPS, then you can use it for moments where you need AoE healing, where, for example, the Afflatus Rapture or a Medica 2 might not be enough. Then, moving on, we have Thin Air. This is one of the many things that makes it so that White Mage has incredible mana management, because of course we have our Lucid Dreaming, which gives us mana back. We have the Lily system, which all of those abilities don't cost mana, and our GCD, so some more free stuff. And then we have Thin Air. Thin Air makes it so that the next few seconds we are not going to be utilizing mana at all. So you can pair this up with, for example, your Holies, when you are just spamming DPS like crazy, or for example, if there is a part in the fight where you need to use Cure 3 a lot, you can pair this up with that as well. Or for example, someone was to die, you use Thin Air to res them, so you don't have to spend that mana cost to res those people with Resurrection. So Thin Air, really great skill. Then moving on, we have Tetragrammaton, or just Tetra for short. This is a single target of global cooldown heal. Pretty good one as well to use. Most of the time what I will be doing is I'll let the tank drop relatively low, and then I use an Afflatus Solus, the single target Lily heal, and then that also allows me to weave Tetragrammaton in between there as well, to just get them back to full HP, or at least close to full HP. And then I'll usually also follow it up with the next skill, which is Divine Benison. This will just place a small shield on one target party member, so basically you use the Lily heal single target, you use Tetra to get them up, and then you can put that Divine Benison on them as well to mitigate some of the damage that is going to be coming in. Then we have Plenary Indulgence. This one got reworked going into Shadowbringers. What this one does right now is when you press it, you're going to be giving a buff to all of your party members. And then when they receive an AoE heal from you, can be Medica, Medica 2, Cure 3, Afflatus, Rapture, and I think that's about it. Then they will basically be healed again. So they still receive the normal heal that you get, but then Plenary Indulgence will give them an extra heal on top of that. So if you're in a situation where a lot of AoE healing is required, Plenary Indulgence is a pretty good skill to use right there. And then last but not least, we have Temperance. These are the wings that you often see as well, which are again a really great skill. They increase the healing that you're going to be putting out by 20%, which is quite a significant amount. And then of course they also grant a 10% damage reduction. So even if you don't plan on just healing a bunch, you can still use it for the damage reduction. Is great for raids where there is a lot of raid-wide damage going out, or for example to just use in the dungeon to make it so that your tank takes less damage, and then your healing output towards that tank is going to go up quite a bit as well. I'm not quite sure if this healing output was only for their GCDs, but even if it was, most of White Mage's healing comes from their GCDs anyways. So it's basically a really great skill to use. So that's kind of a rundown of White Mage. It's a fairly simple healer to play, doesn't have as many of global cooldowns when it comes down to like having to manage all of their heals like the other two healers do. It's fairly simple and straightforward. You have the lilies now in Shadowbringers, which I think is a great addition to the job, and it also works together really well with all of the tanks in the game because you have that benediction, which basically just trivializes all of the negative effects of the invulns that some of the tanks might have. So that's pretty much White Mage. If you have any more questions about it, if you have your own opinions on the job, let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, that's gonna be it for me. So I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.